We're halfway through 2024, and what better way to review the year than to look back on the books I've read so far and see which ones I've loved the most. I've already done a video on the first quarter of the year, which I'll link in the description below, but in this video I'm going to be talking about my favourite books I read in April, May and June, the second quarter. All the books included were rated 4 stars and above, and I'm going to be doing it in order of preference. So stick around to the end of the video to see which book I rated the best this last quarter. I talk about each of these books in more detail in my monthly reading wrap-ups, which I'll link all of them down in the description below. And finally, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. I'm Katerina, and okie dokie, let's get into it. So the very first book on my list is Spring by Ali Smith, and I gave this book 4 stars. This is part of a seasonal quartet where each book is based on a season. All the novels are separate stories, but they're all connected like the seasons are, by similar themes and just the idea of time passing in general. In this novel, the story is split into 3 separate parts. The first follows a film director dealing with grief after his best friend dies, who helps him through his divorce and losing his daughter. The second part follows a woman working at detention center for unwanted immigrants, and she meets a child there who has the power to turn invisible. And the final part is where all these characters meet. And to be honest, there's no real plot here, it's just more revolved around the conversations and stories that these characters have. I like this book because I really did feel like it encapsulated the meaning of the season. It contains a lot of commentary about fresh starts, renewal, connection, death, and rebirth, which is all very central to spring. And despite the bleak topics in the book, it had this overall sense of hope that I do really associate with that time of year. I also adore the author's ability to not shy away from uncomfortable political topics, such as immigration, which is a huge political topic in the UK. I mean, just look at how many seats the Reform Party got in the general election. Just depressing, to be honest.
Brother,
And as well, the author very beautifully intertwines these political subjects with the personal elements of the characters, therefore showing how important and integral politics are to all our lives. Whilst this book does not have speech marks, which is a huge bugbear of mine, I still thought it was a solid read and a solid start to spring. The second book on my list of favourite books is Less Than Zero by Bret, Easton, Ellis, and I gave this book another 4 stars. This was written by the same author as American Psycho, and this was actually his first book. This novel follows an 18-year-old college student who is visiting his hometown in LA during the Christmas holidays. And the story follows him as well as other young, white, rich, overprivileged, and morally corrupt sons and daughters of the neglectful Hollywood elite of the cocaine-addicted 1980s. Throughout the novel, we see the main character progressively feel alienated by the culture around him, therefore losing faith in his friends, family, and his future, whilst also hearing meditations about past events. This book is essentially a period piece criticizing the materialistic hedonism of the 1980s, and I absolutely love that. It shows the apparent nihilism and dissatisfaction amongst the wealthy youth of LA, driving them to extreme lengths to commit drug abuse and morally questionable acts in order just to feel something, showcasing things that should be exciting and thrilling as depressing and completely unglamorous, which is refreshing to get such an unromanticized version of the past where it would be so easy to feel nostalgia for. Plus, I really rated the writing style of this book, having a very clipped, short prose of like matter-of-fact sentences, which is really new to me. It shows how desensitized the main character is by not reflecting on what he's doing and instead just moving from one thing to the next. It gives you this very flat, hollow, detached feeling that honestly made me feel very anxious reading it. Honestly, overall, it's just a great book, and if you're a fan of American Psycho, I would definitely recommend you to read this book. The next book on my list is The Queens of Sarmiento Park by Camila Sosa Villada, and I also rated this book 4 stars. This is a semi-autobiographical novel which blends in elements of magical realism, written by an Argentina transgender author and actress. And the story follows a community of trans sex workers who find solace and camaraderie in each other at their local Sarmiento Park. It follows their lives, struggles, and familial bonds they create amidst a society that mistreats them and rejects them. This novel weaves themes of belonging, identity, resilience, and the search of love and acceptance. It also explores the harsh realities of transphobia, marginalization, and the fight for survival. I will admit to you guys straight away that this book is very heartbreaking and it will probably leave you in a worse place than from when you began, but that doesn't stop it from being an absolutely magnificent, raw, and just beautiful read, as this story is loosely based on true events and circumstances that happen to real people. It's a celebration of resilience and the transformative transformative power of community, showing how queens support and uplift each other even against the backdrop of adversity. And it's a reminder of the human capacity for grace and endurance even in the face of cruelty and ignorance. The portrayal of the transgender experience in Argentina is truly eye-opening, making you realize how past generations really faced abuse and trauma in order just to be themselves. And it makes it more shocking that people are still fighting for transgender rights today. Overall, I really loved and respected this book, and I think it's something that we need to read more of because we never see these sort of perspectives in mainstream media. It shows the importance of community, the strength found in solidarity, and the resilience of the human spirit. The fourth book on my list is All the Lovers in the Night by Mieko Kawakami, and yet again I gave this book 4 stars. This is a Japanese novel that follows a 34-year-old woman, and she lives alone and she works as a freelance proofreader. And throughout her whole life she's found herself unable to make meaningful relationships, whether platonic or romantic, with the people around her, except for a couple of others labelled as outsiders. However, one day she randomly encounters a man and something new stirs up inside of her, and as she's confronted with these new feelings, she begins to see the world in a different light and considers the possibility for change. I love this book because it was such an interesting exploration into loneliness in contemporary Japan. And to be honest, I really felt like the author captured this experience of loneliness in a way that is both specific to its setting in the book, but it's also very universally relatable to readers. And I've said it before, but the author has this godlike ability to write the most boring and mundane characters in the most interesting and gripping way. We read this character's daily life and internal monologue, revealing her observations and the depth of her isolation. But I would say that it's not all depressing because it has a very delicate balance of melancholy and also hope, which I find honestly mirrors the complexities of real life. It's not always just one thing, it's always a mix of both. And specifically with hope, these quiet moments of connection that illuminate our lives, which can be really comforting in a lonely world. I also really like the book because it showcased the fragility of relationships, and it doesn't matter how much you like someone, people can be fickle, and it's heartbreaking but also real. This is just a gorgeous and intimate read that stays with you, and one that just speaks to the heart and the human experience. The next book on my list is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, and I gave this book 4.5 stars, which I'm sure the book talk girlies will be thrilled about. So this is the second book in the very popular A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and the story picks back up in the magical world of fairy, where we continue to follow our main character who, after surviving the trials under the mountain, is grappling with the trauma from the ordeal as well as her new immortal life. However, she finds herself drawn to the mysterious Night Court's High Lord, who offers her sanctuary and freedom, which her beloved Spring Court's High Lord didn't give her. It explores the complexities of politics, the struggle for power, as well as personal issues in navigating freedom and trauma. I've mentioned this already, but I was honestly so shook when I liked this book because I honestly found the first one so boring. It's been so long since I've read a fantasy book that I was actually really excited to read. Now that the world building is familiar from the first book, the second book just has so many extra layers and details that make it really rich and immersive. It creates such a vivid and intricate world that you honestly just lose yourself in, which I personally think is the whole point of fantasy books. You want to lose yourself in another world. The book also tackles some quite dark topics of the main character's struggle with PTSD and her journey of healing, which I would honestly say was handled with realism and respect because it shows that it isn't a linear journey to recovery. Plus, I really loved the characters. I was a bit iffy on the main character being the most boring one, but we move. And I love the romance. The slow burn of enemies to lovers is honestly just my favourite trope. There wasn't as much smut as I expected there to be in this book, but that may just be my unrealistic expectations from reading about this book on Book Talk. But overall, this was a top-tier multi-dimensional fantasy book that I actually really enjoyed, so well done to the Book Talks girlies. You slayed with this one. The sixth book on my list for my favourite books is The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese, and I gave this book 4.5 stars. So this story is set in Kerala, India, and it spans over the years from 1900 to 1977, and it follows 3 generations in a particular family that suffer from a very peculiar affliction, in that every generation at least one person dies by drowning, which is not ideal when this family is literally surrounded by water. Kind of reminds me of that Vine where that girl's like, I can't swim.
I can't swim.
This novel explores a plethora of different themes, including tradition, family, legacy, grief, love, and sacrifice, as well as tackling some very sensitive issues such as discrimination, colonization, and addiction. I took this book on holiday because it is chunky. It's like 700 pages, and I like a big book for a holiday read. And it was a great choice because it was one of those beautifully rich stories that you just lose yourself in because you just get so invested with the plot and characters, especially through its gorgeous, immersive writing. It has such elegant prose and descriptive detail. I thought initially I was going to be put off by how many years this book spanned over, and whilst there were times in the book that certain minor characters were mentioned and I was like, who? Who? I find myself not actually being that bothered by it because they were usually just minor characters that weren't central to the plot. And the main characters were written so well, you kind of just get more swept up in them anyway. And I also found the portrayal of India under British rule super interesting. The long story allows you to see how India transformed into this independent nation. Plus, the story also includes medicinal narratives and how science has allowed us to gain insight into illnesses that we once weren't able to understand. And I believe the author is a doctor, and I really rate it when people write about what they know. I just find the book so much more captivating, and you can tell that they're passionate about it. It's a gorgeous summer read, and I very much enjoyed reading this on holiday. The next book on my list is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, and I also gave this book 4.5 stars. This is a haunting French dystopian novel that follows a woman whose only life she's ever known is being locked in a bunker by an unknown captor since she was a child with 39 other women. She therefore has no other memories apart from being held captive. However, by pure chance, these women manage to escape the bunker, and they have to navigate this unknown world that they find themselves on, and they grapple with new concepts of identity, solitude, and freedom. This book was so settling and eerie that I literally have not stopped thinking about it since I read it. It's a super unique and introspective story that essentially just focuses on the main character's lack of needs and experiences. It's quite a profound meditation on society, isolation, and the innate need for human connection. And the main character is different from all the other women because since she was locked in as a child, the others weren't, and they still have memories of their husbands and kids, and she instead has to listen to these other experiences that the 39 other women had. And it then leads her down a rabbit hole of, okay, then what really makes her human if she wasn't really able to experience these pivotal life experiences? How can she relate and connect to these other women if she didn't have these truly human feelings? I was also very surprised to find out that this book was written in the 90s because I feel like I've only just seen popularity for it in like the past recent years. But I'm so glad that it's finally getting the recognition it deserves because this is a truly fantastic book and I would honestly recommend anyone to read it. And finally, the very last book on my list, and also my favourite of the year so far, was Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, and I rated this book 5 stars. So this novel is set in the early 1990s in rural Ireland, and we follow a teenage girl who's trying very hard to stay on the beaten track. Everyone expects her to finish high school and marry her male best friend, but the older she gets, the less appealed she is to do this. And during one particularly spicy summer, she begins to take a liking to one of the girls in her friendship group in a way that she didn't expect. This fixation blooms into utter infatuation, and their lines between their friendship and relationship begin to blur. And the novel essentially centers around two girls who love each other, even though when everyone else says that they shouldn't. Themes include coming of age love, complex mother-daughter relationships, and religious guilt and trauma. I'm not even joking when I say I absolutely devoured this book. I just found it unbelievably gorgeous. And there was a couple of aspects that I really adored about this novel. Firstly, as a coming of age book, I feel like it really captured this intensity and obsession that comes with having a first love, the all-consuming love and feelings of devotion and loyalty you have for this first-time lover. And so many times I was reading this book, I honestly felt like I was being thrown back 10 years ago from when I was a teenager and remembering how intense these feelings are. And another aspect that reminded me of being a teen were these very complex female friendships. Girls you grow up with begin to change when you become late teenagers, and it's interesting how this then affects the group's dynamics, along with then how certain friends begin to treat you. There's a love and compassion, but also jealousy and competition that come with it, which is so interesting. And thirdly, the exploration of religious guilt that comes from her having a girlfriend in an especially Catholic town, and it's how this main character feels like she's being torn apart in two, with being the person that she wants to be and the person that people love her expect her to be. I absolutely adored this book, and I would 100% 100% recommend it to anyone. And there you have it. Those are my favourite books of the second quarter of the year. Have you read any of these books? If you did, what did you think of them? And if not these books, let me know what were your favourite comments from the second quarter in the comments below. If you like this video, please drop a like down below. It really helps my channel out, as more people can come across me yapping about my silly little books. And if you're new here, please subscribe. I make new videos every Tuesday, which means that you'll be here for the next quarterly video for part 3. Feel free to also follow me on my Goodreads. I recently made an account because so many people have been asking me to, so it's a work in progress. And also please feel free to follow me on my Instagram. I post more personal stuff on there, but I also post about books as soon as I finish reading them, so you can see why I've rated them out of 10 and also what they're about. And yeah, those are my favourite books from the last quarter. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Bye!